Hi, my name is Eric Young. I'm the founder of UTADV, the one who put the group up on Facebook and the UTADV blog that I keep. And I've had a number of people respond back to the photography that I post on a number of different groups that I'm on Facebook. And so I thought I'd go through and maybe give some background into the tools that I use in post-processing the images that I take. And give you some tips and tricks in going through and doing so that way. I'm a photojournalist. I teach photojournalism at a university. I've been teaching that for over 20 years now. Just to give you some background, I have the privilege to be able to take that craft into what I do as an ADV writer and to get the most out of my experience in the rides that I do. So what I'm using for post processing, meaning that after I take an image, I'll go through and download it into my Mac, and I'll go through and start working it a little bit. That's what I mean by post-processing. I'm using Google's NiK Collection. I used to be a big user, a big fan of Photoshop, but lately I've been kind of disgruntled with Adobe's pricing policies and the way they hold you over a barrel to use their products. So what I like most about Google's NiK Collection is that's free. So if you go to google.com/NiK Collection, you can download it right there onto your device, onto your even onto your iPhone, your laptop, whatever it is you might be working with, and have some very powerful photo editing software at your fingertips, like Analog Effects Pro. It gets into a number of already preset filters that are there, and you just apply the filter to the image, and it will go through and create the look that you want. The filters are based on certain types of film looks, certain types of cameras that might be used, like a Panaflex or a 2 1/4 by 2 1/4 or a pinhole camera, whatever it is that you want to get into. I'm not much on that, but a lot of people are that way. Color Effects Pro gets into the ability to work the chroma side, the color information within the data of your images, and allows you to pull out the best rich tones that you're after within that. Silver Effects Pro does the same thing, but it does it for black and white photography, so it's monochromatic, and gives you a tool set that you would find if you were used to working within a dark room to be able to burnish or burn or dodge within your printing. It has all that ability to do that, which is really cool. I like that one a lot. Veza gets into the ability to selectively get into tonality of what you might be working within the image. Here we have a slider that gives us before and after looks of that. There. I use an HDR FX Pro, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Within this one, you can see what's going on. These are presets here that they have. I'll talk about the preset filters that they already have going on within that. And then there's Sharpener Pro and Define, which go through and work with the image definitions and sharpnesses to go through and maybe help out the image, especially if you're using some tools a little bit too much. It has a tendency to alias or get into some pixelation, and these two tools go through and help you out with that. So there's a lot to go over with all those. I'm not going to do that for the intents and purposes of this video, okay? What I encourage you to do is to go through and download the NiK Collection and start playing with it and importing your tools. There are a number of tutorials that are on YouTube that'll help you go through and get the most out of this. And like I said, it's free. I mean, how can you argue with that? It's pretty cool. So that being said, let me get into HDR FX Pro 2. And I've already downloaded an image that you might have seen in the Facebook group on my Facebook page on UTADV. This is taken of the Triumph Tiger 800 XC, and this is on the east side of the Great Salt Lake. And it's looking back towards Stansbury Island, which is where this trip took me. Okay, and I wanted to go through and compose a photograph that might introduce the trip and also kind of give us an idea of the funk that is the Great Salt Lake, because it's not a pretty place, really, and it's got a fascinating history. The deepest part of this lake is 14 feet, and yet it takes up a huge mass of land for the amount of water that's out there that doesn't sustain a whole lot of life because of its salinity, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I wanted something that would be representative of that. Now, the original image that I took with my camera, and I get a lot of questions on what camera I use. The camera that I used for this was a Fujifilm XM1, And the lens on this particular shot here was a 14 millimeter wide angle lens. I think it's the 1.4 Rokinon lens that I have for that. That aside, I mean, I could have taken this with my iPhone, and any iPhone beyond the iPhone 5 has an extraordinarily good lens and image processing in there. So when I get asked what camera do I use, my retort back to you is, what camera do you have? The best camera is one that you have with you. And for most people, that is usually the camera that's included in their smartphone. So regardless if you're using an iPhone, an iOS product, or if you're using an Android product, Samsung, whatever's out there, they're all processing extraordinarily good photographs. And so really it's not the camera that's going to go through and make the image. It's you as a photographer, how you've composed that, how you're able to go through and anticipate what's within your scene that you might be taking into post-processing to get the best out of that. And that's what I did here with this image. So I know going in, I underexpose for a reason. This is one stop underexposed. And what's happened there is I've lost a lot of the detail in the engine area, the frame area of the Triumph. And I've lost a little bit of detail out here. The medium tones are okay. The highlights are kind of dull as well. But I know that going in because I know how HDR FX Pro 2 is going to go through and handle that. So I have downloaded that then, and this is the downloaded image, and its default image here goes through and kind of flattens everything out. In fact, in the balance, it goes through and balances out highlights to shadows. You see now I'm getting a little bit more detail happening within the bike. There within the default, it still goes pretty dark. The tools for this are over here. There's tone compression, tonality, color, and then there's selective adjustments and finishing, which I might get into another clip here if I get into it. I want to talk about tonality really and color within this, remembering that, okay, this is a high dynamic range photograph, meaning that we're able to go through now and see detail in shadow and see detail in highlights. There's not a whole lot of highlights that are happening within this image, but it goes through and evens that out compared to what the original image looks like, right? Okay, see how much detail we're losing within that. So an HDR image gives us the ability to go through and start pulling out detail in areas that normally we wouldn't be seeing that. The filter that I use in my style guide for the blog that I write for UTADV is HDRFX2's Deep 1 filter. And you can see what that looks like now coming up. I like what's going on here. I like the contrast that's going on with the clouds, the band in the middle here. I have gone through and composed this in the middle because I was thinking about using this for a Facebook banner, and that gives me this composition within the middle third of the image, gives me that kind of room to go through and deal with that way. Over here in tonality, as I pressed on that, there's nothing happening within exposure. Shadows and highlights are tweaked. They are not tweaked at all. My contrast is in the middle. My blacks are brought up quite a bit, and the whites are brought up quite a bit in terms of being able to pull out contrast within those highlights and shadows. I don't care much for what's happening here within this, because if we bring the black level up too much, that's up to 69%, they start to turn a little on the blue side, so I'm going to go through and back that off a bit and bring those back to where they're more black in that respect. Structure allows me then to go through and, from a pixel standpoint, polarize a little bit in terms of contrast, what's happening, and pull out more detail throughout the photograph. So before I adjust that, if you watch within the clouds and if you watch within the detail of the bike and in this foreground with these blocks, what happens with that kind of detail as I go through and start to increase the structure. You see the detail coming up in the clouds, you see the detail on the bike and on the blocks in the front. I'll take that out and I'll bring it back in so you can see and contrast what's going on. Now this is getting a lot closer to what I want. A little underexposed for my taste. I'm going to pop that up just one because I have purposefully underexposed it when I actually took the photograph. So I'm going to bring it up about 10% there. And in color saturation, it's up to about 15%. And this is livable with me. I'm not happy with what's happening within the reds. I can take a selective adjustment and actually go through and desaturate that In fact, let me show you how that works. I'm going to go over here, hit a control point, and I'm going to pop it right over that reflector. Okay, now in my saturation, come back up, I'm going to pull a saturation of that down so it's not burning so much. And as I back out of that, when I save it, you'll see that the red of that has been de-emphasized. Now, this is Photoshop Power kind of tools here that I'm using to be able to go through and do that, right? All right, well, it's pretty much where I like it, so I'm going to go through and save this, and I'm going to save this so I can kind of A-B this. I'm going to save this as Hot B to a folder, and once that's saved, I'm going to pull up the two images from that folder and switch them back and forth so you can see the dramatic differences that are played within that. So we'll pull those up. Okay, so here is the original, and here's the post-produced image within that. You see what's happening with all the detail on the blocks here on the front. You see I've desaturated the red off of that. You see how it's a little more saturated within there. I'm getting much more detail off the island and off the mountains in the background and off the reflection of the water. A lot more detail within the structure of the bike. Everything pops, and that's really the function of a high dynamic range photograph, is to go through and give us something that normally our eye sees it, but not all at the same time. Here, the image allows us to see it all at the same time while I'm using these other tools to go through and adjust the tonality and the color and the tone, the overall tone compression of the image. So I hope this answers some questions for you and gives you an idea of what's possible with a very powerful tool from Google that you can download for free and make your images even better. Thanks for watching.